Before we begin, is it okay with everyone that this session be recorded? It is going to be posted on the Franciscan Institute and Cyber Safe TT YouTube channel, so it will be available for persons who may not be able to attend or would like to view it later.
Oh, yeah, it's okay with me.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So I would go ahead and do the introduction while we wait on other persons to join this session today. So good afternoon, good evening again, and good night to all those who are joining from wherever you are. There are people joining from many countries throughout the Caribbean region as well as internationally. So feel free to let us know where you're from and introduce yourself on the Zoom chat. And thank you for joining us today. My name is Annalisa Ramsahai, and I am the Regional Program Coordinator for the Franciscan Institute for Personal and Family Development. It is a ministry of the Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother. The Institute is established here in Trinidad and on the islands of Grenada and St. Lucia. So over the past few years, the Franciscan Institute has taken the initiative to raise awareness on combating human trafficking. And the Institute has adopted 3 of the 4 Ps set out by the United Nations to combat human trafficking. And these are protection, partnering, and prevention. So this year in particular, the Institute did many online human trafficking awareness sessions and training workshops with the Ministry of National Security's Counter-Trafficking Unit of Trinidad and Tobago. And we also did specific webinars on learning about online grooming and sexual exploitation of children with Dr. Karen Moore, a well-known clinical child psychologist and the coordinator of the Franciscan Institute Trauma Team. So stemming out from this online grooming webinar, parents and teachers has been asking about learning some more practical ways in how they can protect their children from predators on social media. So this is why this target audience for today's webinar is geared towards educators, parents, leaders, young adults, and so forth. So feel free to share this recording when it is posted to those who would need this information. For today's webinar on cyber safety, we are really pleased to work in partnership with Darren Duray, a digital anthropologist at CyberSafe TT, and here is a brief bio for Mr. Duray. Darren Duray is the webmaster at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus, and has held that role since 2004. Darren also wears the hat of digital anthropologist at CyberSafe Trinidad and Tobago, an organization that offers services on adapting the digital divide. These services include voluntary informational sessions to schools and nonprofits on topics such as sorry about that. I don't know where I was muted, but I'll continue with Mr. Duray bio. Mr. Duray offers services which include voluntary informational sessions to schools and nonprofits on topics such as cyberbullying, internet addiction, and social media etiquette, as well as professional consulting services to businesses and digital transformation. So thank you again, Darren, for sharing your tremendous expertise with us here today. For today's program, I'll just briefly go through today's program. There will be a brief welcome by Sister Roxanne Nichols, a sister of the Sorrowful Mother based in Grenada. Then Mr. Duray will lead you through today's topic and question and answers segment. And lastly, Sister Gillian Jerome or Sister Delia Monroe, one of the sisters of the Sorrowful Mother based in Grenada, will do a closing thank you. So without further ado, I now hand you over to Sister Roxanne Nichols, who will do the welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Annalisa, and a pleasant good evening to one and all. And on behalf of the Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother, I would like to welcome you all to this evening's seminar. Welcome to all the teachers, all the parents, guardians, young adults, students, We are happy that you are able to join us this evening. Special welcome also to Mr. Darren Dore. We are happy and grateful that you are able to partner with us and helping us to host this evening's workshop, where you'll be able to help us to navigate safely the cyber world in which many of us now reside and interact. So welcome to you. The cyber world in which many of us spend most of our time, and thanks in part to COVID-19, which has forced many of us to engage in many online activities. And so I'm hopeful that this workshop will help us to become aware of the ills of this world in which we now interact, especially as it relates to human trafficking. And so once again, I say welcome to all of you, those throughout the Caribbean region, those internationally, and wish you all the best for a wonderful workshop. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone sitting in on the session this afternoon. I am looking forward to a very fruitful and productive session with everyone here. And we do have quite a lot to disseminate. So without further ado, let me attempt to share my screen and we can begin. So just a quick nod, because I'm seeing some videos here. Is everyone seeing my screen? Perfect, excellent. So good morning or good night to those who may be watching this recorded session, later on. I am very pleased to have this conversation with you today on how social media can play a role in human trafficking. This was indeed a bit of new territory for me, because I did spend a lot of time doing some research on the matter, and I have uncovered quite a bit. And I am definitely happy to share this with you. But before we begin, for some of those who are not aware, here is just a little bit about CyberSafeTT. So CyberSafeTT is a volunteer organization. We are actually celebrating 10 years in 2020. We would have delivered presentations to over 14,000 students, 2,000 teachers, 3,500 parents, and just over 200 professionals since our inception. And as indicated before, the topics that we would have spoken on would be cyberbullying, social media etiquette, and infamous internet addiction. Many of us probably are not aware, but I'm sure some of us sitting in on the call today might have some little bit of addiction to the internet. And I know our kids are probably being affected by too much internet use as well. So I'm really happy to see so many of you joining on the call today. And I will probably add to these numbers that you're seeing on your screen, because I know that we have folks from far and wide, not just Trinidad and Tobago, sitting on the call today. I thought it would have been best to give you an idea of what that was. Some of the countries that are represented today are Grenada, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Dominica, United States of America, and of course, Trinidad and Tobago. I'm not sure if we had a splurge of new registrations since I got this information. So if I missed out your country, please don't hold it against me. You are well represented regardless. And of those individual countries, we have today, well, at least I have today, a bit more mature audience than usual, as I am accustomed speaking to secondary and primary school students, even though we do have sessions for teachers and parents as well. Nonetheless, I hope that each and every one of you would be able to take something away, and that the time that you spent with me in this presentation would have been useful. So as we get into the thick of things today, I thought it's best that I share with you some of the areas of reference that I would have utilized while working on this presentation, in the event that you yourself may want to do further research on your own. So I would have reference websites that you are seeing here. interviewed and spoken to a couple individuals from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, as well as the Trinidad Guardian, and who work within that particular group of companies as well. And this was really for me to make sense of the information that was available on the internet. Not all of the information would have been specific to Trinidad and Tobago, and I really wanted, and the Caribbean, and I really wanted, to bring some points home. So when I speak to you about some of the statistics and so on going forward, you would see reference to what would be foreign and then what would be local and Caribbean and regional. So here's a brief overview of what we are going to discuss today. Yeah, as I indicated, it's an information-packed session. So I would appreciate if you can hold questions until the end of the session. You can type them into the chat, and at the end, we would try to answer as much of them as possible. Now, one last item before we begin. Anyone here who may have sat in on my previous presentations would have known that I usually wear my signature red Cyber Safety t-shirt, but not today. That's because I'm trying to help orange the world. With today, November 25th, being International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, I somehow felt as if the gods were sending a message that I was gifted with the opportunity to help in this initiative by sharing on such a related topic of human trafficking. So, without further ado, let's begin to answer the question, what is human trafficking? Now, I'm not going to come to you with a textbook definition because we can all Google up that information and find it on our own. But I want you to open your minds to a different concept of human trafficking, particularly in the digital age. You see, we shouldn't be blinded to think that human trafficking only involves the physical movement of a person. Once you can achieve the act as listed here, the means and purpose in any one of these combinations, then it can be categorized in a sense as trafficking. So there is recruitment, which can be done online. There is deception, abuse of power, which also can be done entirely online. And there's exploitation, which again can be done entirely online. So that's something that we have to be very much aware of. And throughout some of these slides, you would see some website addresses that are posted there. Of course, if you can't take them down at the time of presentation, you can always look at the recording and you will be able to get the links to the information that is shared. So on this topic of human trafficking in the digital age, according to the website humantraffickinghotline.org, the myth, and when I say the myth, the traditional definition of human trafficking indicates that it involves a movement from one place to another. However, in reality, and in 2020 and going forward, persons can actually be trafficked right in their own home. And we use the word human trafficking ever so often, but it can also be used in collaboration with or have the same meaning to what you're seeing here. And I'm sure that there are many other definitions and terms and phrases that can be used to bring that thought and concept to mind. And there are two that I've highlighted here, trafficking in persons and modern slavery. A lot of times it has been referred to as a form of modern day slavery. And you would want to wonder why in 2020 we are still in this unfortunate type of activities and state. Well, as with the root of many things, the business of human trafficking globally is a very, very lucrative industry with reportedly over US $150 billion in profits. Now, the annual profit, and there are two things that I pulled out of the UNDP's site here. There are two bits of information. The annual profit per victim, so let's just say that, an individual is being trafficked. The annual profit per victim of forced labor, so that's if they were actually trafficked for forced labor, that person would bring to the person that's actually engaging in that human trafficking act an annual profit of US $7,500. And then we look at the annual profit of exploitation And that actually brings to the person who is trafficking that individual, that victim, an annual profit of US $21,800. And these are rough averages. But just understand that this is the type of figures that we are looking at when it comes to human trafficking. And if we were to extrapolate this to third world countries and less developed countries where the US currency can be converted to far much more in their local currency, you can fully well see why this might be, unfortunately attractive for someone to engage in. So let's begin our discussion today and speaking about the role of social media and how social media can actually play a part in human trafficking. So what it has actually done is, unfortunately, it has simplified the recruitment process. So previously, recruitment would have had to been a bit more face-to-face and less virtual. Whereas in this instance, there is a very high possibility that recruitment can be done entirely online, with the possibility of continuing the act online or having that ultimate, come and meet me at the mall or meet me for a drink somewhere. And then it actually goes into a person actually being abducted and so on and so forth. The trafficker can actually approach multiple victims simultaneously. That means that they can have multiple online accounts pretending to be, or a single online account, and looking at all the options of victims that are currently available. So what we are seeing here is that technology and social media is making it easier and quite possibly increasing the number of victims that a particular trafficker might be able to traffic in a very smaller period and shorter space of time. It's so much easier to get to know who would be the ideal victim now, because we have an unfortunate habit of sharing far too much information on the internet. And when I say we, I know this really applies to some of the younger folks, where we really drop our guard. They really drop their guard, I should say, when they use the internet. It's because it's become ubiquitous, in their daily lives. It's something that, they would look out for before anything else. As I fondly say, when I actually have presentations in other areas, when I was, a teenager and younger, if my parents took me out on a vacation, you would want to know if they have some of the creature comforts, like warm water and, a swimming pool or cable television even. Now, all the kids want to know is whether or not there is Wi-Fi access. They couldn't care less if they were in the middle of the jungle. They just want to know that they have Wi-Fi. It's because they really simply can't live without it. And they do everything on the internet. And with that, you end up with folks sort of dropping their guard. It's really easy for a trafficker to actually form relationships now, as compared to having to do it face-to-face. And the technology has also made it a lot easier. For example, things like self-erasing technology, the ability to actually have multiple social media accounts so that you can have multiple personas. And also it's really easy for these traffickers to access particular vulnerabilities based on what is posted. So in terms of developing a second persona, for the parents that are sitting in on the call today, you might have been told, or you might believe to yourself that, I know all of these social accounts that my son or daughter has. I'm a friend with them on this one, and they have a friend with me on that one. But what you probably aren't aware of is that they probably also have multiple accounts as well, and it's those other accounts that you might want to be a little bit wary of, and you may not even know about it. So I always give the quick tip that there is always that cool aunt or uncle who might confide with their niece and nephews or your children, and they may be on those social platforms, and for all they may be friends with your children, on the other handles that you aren't. And that's a good way for, to sort of keep an eye out. You're not trying to be the helicopter parent, but you just want to keep that eye out. You want to be the parent in the virtual world the same way in which you are in the real world. So pull all the tricks out of the bag and, make sure that, you can be that type of parent. So some of the things that we highlighted here, we would speak a little bit more on, one of them being self-erasing technology. So I'm not sure if you're fully aware of this. So even though you may have access, for example, to their social media platforms, some of them, and as you can see here, quite a few of them are the popular ones, now have this self-erasing technology where a message posted can be, a message posted will disappear after, whether it be a few seconds, a few minutes, sometimes days or weeks. And the different apps can actually have different settings that would allow that message to disappear. So if for whatever reason your kid is engaging in some sort of conversation with a stranger, and we'll have to put it at that for now, of course, they may be saying intimate things. They probably know that what they're saying and doing on the internet is something that a parent or guardian would frown upon. So therefore, they would try to employ a whole host of different techniques to cover their tracks. And self-erasing technology, which unfortunately, in my opinion, is being implemented in almost all the mainstream applications, is something that's also being used in cases like this. The one that I have highlighted here, however, is PrivNote. It's not an app, it's a website. So the thing is, you can actually still keep your social media apps clean, but visit PrivNote. You don't even need to have an account. You type it up in the website browser, send your messages to whoever you want to send it to, and then close off, almost as if that interaction never happened. So that's one thing to note, parents, that even though someone might be willing to give you their device, their laptop or their phone, and say, yeah, sure, fine, go ahead, check, I'm not doing anything. There is that option, and you can check to see if that's turned on or not. Now, we're speaking about using social media and traffickers being able to easily assess the vulnerabilities of their potential victims. And on the right of this screen here, this slide, I actually have a tweet that was sent by someone earlier this week. Of course, the names have been changed, and I've sort of tried to eliminate something to point back to that particular individual. But I'm just going to read what it is that they said. So the person said, so I'm in this place today buying something, and the cashier says, "How was your day, Jane?" And then they proceeded to have a full conversation. And when she walked out, she realized that at no point in time did she ever say her name. But yet still the person was able to identify her. And this would have been a random person out of, it's not a place that she would have been quite accustomed to visiting. And here's the interesting thing about this. She was unaware that information about her was so freely available. One. Two, I think she was unaware and also quite taken aback that someone, a complete stranger, would take that information and record it in their minds so that they would actually now remember her name by face and begin to have a conversation. So the thing is that, and the point to take away here is that we post simply too much information on the internet, and not just that, but we often forget who we share it with. So now, just before we enter the session this afternoon, I do this check, on Facebook and on Instagram and Snapchat and so whatever. On Facebook, I have over 1,000 friends, 1,000 likes. And I was like, I don't know personally 1,000 people. It's just impossible for me to even remember, some of the names of the guys that, I went to school with. But I don't have 1,000 friends physically. However, I have 1,000 friends virtually. And it's a natural, event to just add someone when they send you a friend request. In my particular position, because of cyber safety, what I do, I may add folks that, I may not necessarily know, because I know that they're coming to me for information. But a minor or a teenager really should be quite particular about who they add. And I know that this is something that's not happening because, one, they may add the wrong person and forget that they added that wrong person. And the problem begins when they start to use social media in the manner in which they are accustomed to, where they vent and they express their feelings. They be very open. And in some instances, if you would have read, some of the Twitter accounts of victims in the past, some of them, they would have stated the whole world. And people right close to them, living in the house and, sleeping in a bedroom right next to them, would not have a clue that that particular individual is going through this amount of emotional stress or pain. And they use these online platforms to express themselves. So a lot of it starts from home in terms of, having conversations regularly with, your kids and the ones that you are in charge of, just to make sure that everything is, is good. They should have an avenue to release and vent outside social media, because if they don't, then they're gonna look towards social media, and that now allows a trafficker to assess the vulnerability of a potential victim. Because if you have a low self-esteem, then it's really easy for me to tell you what you want so that you can actually give me what I want. And we often tend to let our guard, down, and particularly be very emotional when we're on social media. Now, even though at the same time we're speaking about at home, having that avenue for being able to communicate easily, abuse also happens in a particular way, and it doesn't have to be physical. And this is something that can permeate into, another way in which too much information is shared online, and how this whole online grooming begins to take place. So abuse isn't always physical. Someone might be a victim of cyberbullying, which is very, very rampant in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm sure in the Caribbean, I know I would have done some conversations with my colleagues in Jamaica, and I know that that's a big issue there as well. And I really welcome the opportunity to speak to a couple of schools in Grenada, in the coming weeks on these particular topics, because knowing how to deal with a cyberbullying issue is one step in preventing, or preventing you from being a victim of human trafficking. We have to be extremely cautious with what we say. Sometimes it's very easy for words to come out of our mouths, and you're thinking that, well, I'm not really abusing them, I'm just telling them something, but the saying, sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can really hurt you. And it's really much more pertinent now than before. So online grooming, it's that concept, and I know the Institute would have had different sessions on online grooming, so I don't want to go in too much into the definition of it, but it's essentially a mechanism that is a catalyst for human trafficking, where you tell the victim what they want, you make promises, you are the heir that they are looking for, you are that shoulder that they want to cry on. And they are fantastic in doing it. They focus on meeting the needs of the vulnerable youth, by understanding, what their hurts are. And they have the correct things to say. And I'll show you a slide in a couple as to how they can respond, to simple things that they may see. For example, updating their social media status with a particular phrase that might indicate, hey, it looks as if this person is going through some challenges. And whereas the true friend online might want to lend a comforting, word towards that, then there is also the trafficker who is also going to lend that comforting word, but he may be too real. Now, there's one thing that I uncovered in terms of how a trafficker works, is that they often tend to make promises to buy things for individuals. And that's generally how, in the past, a trafficker would have gotten someone to leave the comfort of their home and come meet them outside. And hopefully the unfortunate event wouldn't happen immediately, but you may meet someone, and it could be someone from secondary school, primary school, and they may have to travel to go home, and they may leave home and go to meet this person whom they've only met online, because, they would have expressed some sort of, need or want online, and that trafficker would have made promises to fix their phone, or buy them a new phone, or buy them some sneakers, or get them something nice to eat. Simple things that, we might think. But remember, we are also speaking about emotionally vulnerable individuals. So what might be simple in our minds might be a really big thing to them. So I wanted to draw a reference here on buying electronic gifts. And electronic gifts would be things that parents would not even be aware of that their kids are receiving. That's really important to note, folks, because you can actually get, things like what I have listed here. And I'm not really, to be honest with you, I'm not really talking about gift cards like Amazon and so on. I'm talking about gifts that you can use in online gaming, things like V-Bucks and World of Warcraft Gold and so on. These are things that a trafficker can actually just, send to someone's account and they receive this money. And I mean, I know some kids, they go crazy over, these digital type of currencies. And you can easily win someone's friendship by, doing this type of activity. And that leads me to online gaming, where some of these tournaments are open. So there are online gaming sites where you have open tournaments, and an open tournament is one where anyone is allowed to join, not just, the friends from school, but anyone throughout the world. And it's not to say that, we're going to block and prevent our kids from engaging in these activities, because I have seen, some kids excel fantastically in the online gaming realm, so much so that, it's become a profession for them. And some of them even make, a pretty decent amount of money by playing and winning online games. But what we have to bear in mind, and this is what they need to be aware of, is that it allows the traffickers and pedophiles to lure kids in with things like free upgrades and e-currency. And the point to note here is that these kids are not categorized as vulnerable. They don't have depression issues. They're not, they're probably not emotionally unstable. They're probably just as happy as you and I on a regular day, and they are happily playing their games. That does not mean that they are not a potential target for human trafficking. Because again, if you try to get into the mind of a human trafficker, which is essentially trying to get into the mind of a criminal, you realize that everyone and everything is fair game. So it's something that, I think that we as parents need to be extremely aware of. We would have spoken about in the past, chats as it pertains to these online gaming tournaments and who can come in and say what and share what. And it does not, and let's be very real here. This is not limited only to online gaming tournaments, but there are many sites that are open and free. Even some educational sites where you create an account and anyone can actually join. And there is really no sort of security restrictions. So it's something to be aware of. We need to make our kids aware of it and let them know. I mean, that very simple phrase from back in the 80s, don't talk to strangers, it really applies in the real world as well as in the virtual world. So I did mention to you about some phrases, and I sincerely apologize for, the size of the text here. I'm sure if you look at the recording thereafter, you might be able to see it a little bit more. But this is almost like a game book that a trafficker might possibly use, where he would look at a core message that comes from a unit that exposes some level of vulnerability, that they might say they're not feeling loved, I don't have any friends, I'm scared, I want to be successful. A lot of negative thoughts and comments. And unfortunately, these are comments that I see on a regular basis. I have so many youths that have followed CyberSafe TT account and followed other accounts that I'm associated with, and ever so often something might pop up. And I take the responsibility to, either follow up with their school, if I know their parents, or someone that's related to them and saying, hey, just have a look, see what's going on here. This is, send a screenshot of that tweet, but that may not necessarily happen across the board. And the trafficker will probably be looking at those messages that are being posted, and they'll respond. And if you look at the responses are, something that a parent should say, something that, a loved one really should say, or a fellow friend. But if they are looking for, the vulnerable, they are ready and waiting. The thing is, they have time. And I have realized that in the online space, especially adults, we come online and, we don't really have too much time to waste, other than if we binge in something on Netflix. But, we come in to get our work done and we go off. Whereas kids, they'll probably stay on for hours on end. And because of that, again, I have to reiterate that they make the internet and they make the device, almost another part of them. And really and truly, I think that they forget that what they are seeing and what they're interacting with is really to not just their small bubble or people that they know, but to the rest of the world. And quite possibly to some of those strangers that they would have added before. Here's a very, very interesting and scary fact. Pedophiles can actually groom children in as little as 20 minutes. And this came from a 2016 study from Swansea University by a professor. I found that to be quite scary. And it means that these persons are, simply put, they're professionals in what they do. And I think that they have the opportunity and the ability to, use the technology to the greatest disadvantage, especially for those who are vulnerable on the internet. Now, there are some other online recruitment tactics that might apply for an older audience. And I thought that, it's probably still interesting that I mention it as well. So job advertisements have actually proven to be one of the growing tactics that have been used by traffickers within recent time, particularly over the last year with the advent of COVID and a lot of folks losing jobs. Many people post up, I should say many people. There are many job advertisements that are somewhat false and present, very attractive offerings and quite often require no experience or very, very little. And you have folks who are coming out of, losing a particular job and just really looking for something to do. And, they're exploiting that need by that particular individual. And it may end up to be something that's not, entirely true at all. And then there's another thing that I noticed as well, and this was from doing some research on some other forums, request for recommendations, particularly on Facebook. So ever so often, for those of us who have Facebook accounts, you might probably see someone is looking for a recommendation for a business that might, make furniture, or someone who may be selling a particular product or offering a particular service. And in the true nature of social media, you're going to have scores, maybe hundreds of people responding, saying, yes, we can actually do this. My recommendation here is, you go by what your friends recommend. It means that they probably would have tried out the service or would have heard that someone used the service before. I would really stay away from just jumping in and trying to meet someone, physically, or get involved with someone to, to complete a particular service that, you've never met or have any relation with. It's really important that, if you have to meet someone, and again, this is a message for adults as well as for the young ones. If you have to meet someone, you might be purchasing a toy or a piece of jewelry, whatever it is, don't go by yourself. Simple and straightforward as that, Again, a lot of the things that we're mentioning here is as a result of interacting with social media and technology. And I think we were realizing, and it's something that I often start off my conversations with, is that technology is not the problem, but it's how we use it, right? So I just thought I'd stick that in there. The social media realm and internet is just making it so much easier for many of these things to take place that we really have to bear in mind. And again, at the end of the day, it's not for us to remove access to, right? Because that's not going to make sense. In one of the previous slides, I shared with you some apps. I'm sure that there are tons of other apps that, people can have messaging and so on for. So it's not a matter of the app, but it's really how you use it and the education that's around it. Now, social media can actually be used to control victims, and I've actually seen this before. And again, this adds to that whole act and means and purpose that we discussed earlier when we understand what human trafficking is. So many reports would have come to CyberSafeTT with respect to, sharing of private photos, whether it's voluntary or involuntary. And you may have an instance where a trafficker, woos a victim into thinking that, they are getting intimate, and, the relationship builds on the internet. And one thing leads to the next. And unfortunately, the victim may send some, very private photos of themselves. And this is not adults, this is younger folks. I mean, unfortunately, I see it on a very regular basis, or have reports of this being, shared on a regular basis. And people still just don't learn. If it's something that you don't want anyone else to see, don't share it on the internet regardless. So you have two courses of actions here, where the trafficker could then threaten to release those private photos, in which case now you have control over that person to do whatever, keep sending more. And they can then either use those pictures and sell it to pornographic websites, or, to make some additional money there. But pretty much you have that person under your control. And they just keep asking for more and more. And you might think to yourself, well, why don't someone just, why don't they, they just come and report it? But it's, again, whether it's a younger person, worst case, or even an older person, they realize that, they've really made an error, and it's a lot of embarrassment, and they feel as if they're going to get into a whole lot more trouble if they report it. So, they live in that, in that space, and, try by whatever means they believe is appropriate to get out of it. So there's a lot of psychological manipulation that's going to be done, by the trafficker. In some cases, reverse psychology, where, they tell them that you are nothing without me. You really need to stay with me and stick with me. And again, I'm using this in context of, the whole idea or concept of, owning someone, and modern man, having someone almost as a slave, in an entirely virtual sense. Because yes, there are so many conversations that we can have with respect to the traditional forms of human trafficking, but that's not what we are here to speak about today. Because the scary thought is someone very close to you who might be in, that bedroom right next door, might be experiencing some of these things. So it's always good for us to be aware of what's going on. And that brings me to identifying some traits of online victims. And a lot of these traits actually are quite similar, or even very similar, I should say, to identifying a regular human trafficking victim in real life. They become very reclusive, so they try to avoid eye contact, with people. They're not as open and jolly as they are. They have extremely low self-esteem. If you speak about anything to do with law enforcement, they may get, agitated, for example. And one of the other things that may not necessarily relate to the digital aspect of things, but if you see a lot of children at workplaces or children working, that has often been interpreted as a telltale sign that there may be an adult that's, being trafficked. So we are, coming a bit closer to the end of the presentation today. I know that we would have mentioned quite a lot, and I am really happy that, we would have had a few individuals from, the Caribbean, and, someone that's from the United States as well, a couple of folks from the United States sitting in. So what I attempted to do was kind of give a sense as to how Trinidad and Tobago, as well as some of these other countries, rank in the global sense of dealing with human trafficking. So Trinidad and Tobago is currently at tier 2. And as you can see here, there are 3 tiers of this human trafficking categorization for countries. And tier 2 indicates that the government has recognized and making significant effort to meet the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which you can get from the United States government. and that they are meeting the minimum standards. And it also indicates that the governments are significantly doing things on an annual basis to continue to combat the particular instance. Now, I've highlighted a few here. I think I would have been able to capture the majority of our panel, of our audience today. And again, being in Trinidad and Tobago, I had to highlight, under the tier 3, which I'll explain to you in a bit, that of Venezuela. So this gives you an idea, and it's really interesting to have a look at this. And it's a standard that's used by the United States government to assess, how other countries have or are improving their ability to combat human trafficking. And again, for information purposes, in Trinidad and Tobago, law states that criminalize sex trafficking and labor trafficking would bring to you fines of 15 years of imprisonment and no less than $500,000 where the victim is an adult. And of course, you're seeing something very different for children, where it's no less than 20 years and no less than $1 million where the victim is a child. So in Trinidad and Tobago, there have been a steadily, increase in the number of victims and people and persons charged. What we're seeing here is that, the cases are hovering around the high 30s. And of course, that is what, any country would want to bring down. And I think once traffickers are aware that, that the government is making an active case, and the protective services are actively working towards solving these problems, that's one step in bringing some sort of resolve to this going forward. So I also have some, again, a bit of unfortunate stats. So in the past 50 days, 12 females have been reported missing, and in the past 50 days, 11 males have been reported missing. Whether or not, I think out of these, though, 1 or 2 of them may have been recovered. I am not making any sort of direct linkages to this and human trafficking, but I'm just saying that a lot of these are younger folks. And in my conversations with some members of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, they said that, based on their investigations, they have had instances where most of these individuals, the younger ones, have had a trail of conversations online that led to that particular victim eventually leaving their household and at a point being reported missing. So this map here sort of gives us a better sense as to how the region, is dealing with human trafficking. And Trinidad and Tobago being so close to Venezuela, again, I thought that it's best that, I put in a little bit of information here. So you can see that, Venezuela is currently listed on the tier 3. And what that indicates is that, the government has not or does not fully meet the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking. And it seems to be that they are not also making any significant efforts to do so. The only bit of information that I was able to gather on this is that 17 individuals were arrested or indicted on the trafficking in 2019 compared to 99 in 2018. So this is for us to just bear in mind that we are, Trinidad and Tobago, we are quite close to an area where there is a lot of migration, deportation, refugee status, and so on. We have a very topical conversation going on right now in the news with a series of kids, and the term human trafficking did actually come up, and it makes sense because you have a group of kids with no parents involved. So you have to look at all particular cases where how were these kids collected or gathered in the first place by the adults that were present there. And again, we're not making any assumptions, but these are all questions that need to be asked. Is this part of a trafficking act? So it's just to say, read what you see in the media, but also understand that there could be a whole lot more to what's going on in a particular situation. And I'm drawing reference to this because we may also need to be aware of walking on the streets and seeing, kids, unsupervised or working, and they may have been a victim, for example, of human trafficking. And we need to be aware of it and report it to the authorities when necessary. So we're on the topic of social media and the internet and human trafficking, and it would be remiss of me if I did not mention the concept and the idea of the dark web. I'm sure some of you may have heard this term before, but I really have to get into a little bit of detail on this now, because even though we spoke about a few social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and so on, where the victim may present themselves in a vulnerable way and, eventually, become trafficked. What we have to be mindful of as well is that the trafficker also needs some sort of mechanism to sell that product, right? I mean, not meaning to sound harsh, but that's essentially what they're doing. And the dark web, unfortunately, is that area that a lot of this activity happens. So there are 3 layers of web, and I'll explain that to you now. There is the clear web or the visible web, and that's what we're all accustomed to. That's, your Amazon, your Google, your school websites, news websites, anything that you can actually go to Google or Yahoo and search for. Once it can be indexed and show up in a search engine listing, that's the clear web. We're not entirely worried about those because, for the most part, those are the good guys. Those are the websites that actually have information that we want to get. Then there is the deep web and the dark web. Now, there's a clear distinction between the both. Now, the deep web is not entirely bad. The deep web is not indexed by search engines, but it does actually contain a lot of reference material, academic information. So these are database-driven websites where you have to actually, for example, pay a subscription to be able to peruse these websites and download papers, research papers on topics. And I would have utilized the deep web to get some research information for the topic today. There are also a few areas on the deep web where you can utilize things like Proton Mail, for example, to send, anonymous type emails. But yes, for the most part, it's not that bad. And then there's so before we get into the dark web, so both the clear and deep web, you can utilize your standard website browser to access. So things that Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, Safari, Firefox, the popular ones. But then we have the dark web. So the dark web, first of all, you can't access the dark web on a conventional browser. You need a particular type of browser to access it. If, for example, you hear that your child is utilizing a browser such as Tor, or they may say an Onion browser, that's something that allows you to access the dark web. Now you need to really be, a little bit technical if you're venturing into the dark web in the first place, and I am by no means making any recommendation for anyone sitting in the conversation today to do so. Because by getting into that environment, you are also opening up your computer to hackers and the whole, world of online vulnerabilities if you are not so protected. So just downloading an Onion browser or a Tor browser and trying to get access to the internet will probably lead you into a lot of trouble. So you can't search Google for these websites. Nothing's going to come up. They exist. Their website addresses changes quite regularly. And they have very, very, very bad content. I chose not to share any of that content today. You can do your own research on what you can find on the dark web. But you can pretty much purchase anything on the dark web. And by anything, I mean anything, you name it, from drugs to people. And this is the avenue in which many human trafficking incidents would take place, on the dark web. So I'm just gonna sort of end that at this point in time. If you were wondering, okay, fine. So a trafficker has a victim. How do they sell them? What do they do at that point? And that's one of the avenues and areas. And there have been many attempts to take down these pages. and websites that, deal on the dark web, and particularly that of human trafficking. But again, it's $150 billion industry, folks. So you take down one and 10 are going to come up, the next day. So it really boils down to education, and hopefully, after sessions like today and, other sessions you might attend, you would know that, it's no longer, applicable for you to just be a bystander. If you see anything, look a little bit more into it, report it. There are counter-trafficking units in all of the, in most of the countries represented today. I know that there is one in Trinidad and Tobago and the United States and Jamaica. So get information about your particular counter-trafficking unit. Report anything that looks suspicious. We are in, a very unprecedented time. In COVID-19, so many different things have happened. And this statistic from the, UN Women on the particular day that we are looking at today, where 2/3 of the anti-trafficking workers reported seeing an increase of online recruitment for the purpose of sexual exploitation online. So again, remember, all of this could happen without someone leaving their home. So we have to be extremely mindful that this is a real thing. This is something that we have to be very, very wary of. And in the end, we just really want to put, a stop to human trafficking. So that actually brings me to the end of the conversation today. I really hope that, those who are listening on have something that you can take away. I don't know if I really didn't see much questions in the chat, but I'm sure we could probably field some of those questions now. Please take that time to visit, cybersafety.com. I do have a lot of presentation material and videos and articles, not just on this topic, but a whole host of things cyber related, from social media etiquette to internet addiction, cyberbullying, and so on. Cyber Safety is on Facebook and Instagram platforms. And if you'd like to contact me to get a similar session like this for yourself, please visit cybersafety.com/Darren to get more information. So with that, I think I want to hand back the floor to Annalisa, and we can probably field a few questions here.
Thank you very much, Darren. That is such an interesting presentation you did there, because I know many of these apps and many of these websites that you're talking about, I didn't realize the extent and how dangerous it could be as well. We would like to take this opportunity for those of you who are here present with us to open your mics or share in the chats any questions that you would like to really ask Darren at this time, because we are available to help you, especially in the country that you're at. Thank you.
I see we have one question from Ms. Nikisha Joseph on PrivNote. So PrivNote is a website. You can actually visit privnote.com. It's different, and I made reference it because it's different than the feature that's just naturally or organically available in WhatsApp or Messenger or Instagram to actually have messages disappear. So PrivNote, you visit website, you actually send the link to another person. So it could be, I mean, in the most innocent sense, it could be two friends that, they just want to have a conversation online, and, they don't want to speak on the phone or whatever it is, and they can just, have that conversation on PrivNote, create that session, and all the messages will disappear after, and everything will be fine. However, what would have been the situation where, with PrivNote, where a trafficker could actually say, listen, let's communicate on this channel instead of, utilizing WhatsApp or whatever it is. And that's where you're going to have the problems, because they wouldn't have a trace, particularly, in terms of if protective services might want to look at a device thereafter, they would, not see anything on the device because it's, it has been taken away. So I hope that that explained PrivNote. It's freely available. There is no restriction, and you don't even need an account in it. Yes, Signal was not on the list, and Clyde Lawrence. Yeah, there are so many. There are so many apps. I just thought to mention the more popular ones, and Signal is actually quite a very popular one as well. How can I determine someone has been, well, to be honest with you, Cheryl, and I don't think that we could, just randomly look at people and know whether or not they're in a particular state or not. I think if they are not exhibiting any sort of, of those symptoms, there isn't much that we can do. But what I would say is that we can have conversations with like-minded adults and let them know, of what those symptoms are. So maybe somebody who might be, more in touch with that particular person, at some point in time might be able to see some clues. I wouldn't go up to, to the random person and ask them a question, because that might also trigger a few things as well. Sometimes these things have to be done quite discreet. Even from a social media perspective, you can't just, opt and say, hey, stop using social media or give me a phone. It's all about education and building a level of understanding and awareness in the individual.
Yeah, so right, Darren, I remember a time when I was teaching in a school, and it was a secondary school, and the student said, Miss, we don't use Facebook anymore.
That's right.
They have Snapchat, now they have Instagram and TikTok. And now they're very open in sharing videos on themselves, of themselves. And the more followers and views that they get, they're very happy. They don't care who is following them or watching them.
Yeah.
So do you have any advice or how to protect your internet, especially for the younger ones who may be using, let's say, a computer or phone, a parent phone who could get access to these things? Do you have any advice or suggestions?
Oh, yes, definitely. So what I can probably do actually is see if I can pull up very quickly a recent presentation that I did for a school, because I actually mentioned a couple options for being safe on the internet for kids. So I can do that right now. That would be okay?
Sure.
I'm going to just share my screen. Right, so you all should be seeing something like Koala Safe. Yeah, perfect. So at home, of course, we have internet access that's coming in from our internet service providers. And that's unbridled internet access. That means you can pretty much gain access to everything. Now that kids are actually home 24/7 and they need to use the internet both for play and work, academic studies and recreational activities, it's really difficult. It's extremely difficult for parents to know whether or not when they sit behind that screen that they're not playing Fortnite or they're looking at a music video on YouTube. So there are two apps, sorry, not apps, there are two physical devices. These are actual hardware devices that I would have tested out, personally, who might me. And I think that they work really well. So the first one is Koala Safe, and you can purchase this off Amazon. I have no ties with the company, just to let you know, it's just something that I would have tried and it works really well. So as the screen says, it allows you to schedule internet access, manage usage, set homework internet, for example, and I'll explain that in a little bit. And really important, control from your smartphone. So it connects really simply. You just connect it to your router and it creates its own network called Koala Safe, and you just have the kids join that. And you then are allowed to actually install an app on your mobile device. And as you can see here, the first screen on the mobile app says, okay, here's what I want to give internet access from, this time to this time and only on these days. So you can actually be very particular with, scheduling access to the internet, and not just access, but what it is you want during that particular time. So there is a homework mode, and then there is a recreation mode where during homework mode, okay, you can't get access to any sort of social media apps. You can go on YouTube to do research, but you can't look at music videos and so on and so forth. So it's pretty robust in that particular regard. In one of my conversations with the TTPS, they indicated that a lot of the conversations that kids have with, whether it be folks who they end up in getting in trouble with, cyberbullying or even trafficking and so on, it happens in the wee hours of the morning. It doesn't happen generally, during the day. And this is when, they may be in that, presumably safe place in their bedroom with the device. And because we all have wireless and some of us even have data plans, we really can't see, what they're actually doing. So this is one particular way to prevent it. And I did mention data plans. This does not work if they have a data plan, because you pretty much bypassing your home network at that point, right? So unfortunately, many of the ISPs in the Caribbean region, they don't have content filtering and this type of protection from their package. Verizon and AT&T and so on in the United States, you can actually purchase internet from those companies with parental control, which is pretty fantastic. But we don't have that here as yet. If at some point, the child end up in a website that they shouldn't have, they will see the screen, whether it's on their device, laptop, mobile, whatever it is. And you as a parent will also receive an email saying, hey, look, this is what actually, attempted to take place. Now, the other option is to actually get a router with parental control software. And Synology router has, pretty decent parental control software that's very easy for a non-technical person to use. And I tend to get the solutions for non-technical people, because I know there are a lot of parents here who might be interested in this type of information. So as you can see, it's all online and web-based. You can do pretty much the same things with scheduling internet access and so on. The days and the times and for how long and what you want to do. They also have web filtering and stuff. So I would definitely recommend either Koala Safe, or if not the Synology router, any sort of router that enables parental control to help the parent really manage their internet access at home. Now, remember, at the end of the day, technology is not the problem. It's really, education and letting the students know, or your kids know that, hey, you're on the internet, you have to have some level of responsibility. When you're supposed to be doing work, let's do work. And, don't venture into areas that, you really shouldn't be venturing into.
Thank you so much, Darren. I know that we are out of time, so I would invite all those who have questions and other information, feel free to email us or contact the Institute or Darren at cybersafeTT.com, and we can address your concerns. At this time, I would now like to invite Sister Jillian Jerome to say our thank you for tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. As Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother, we pledge our commitment to bringing fuller life to others. And so this afternoon's workshop, as put on by the Franciscan Institute, is a clear indication of one of the ways in which we try to do so. And in doing so, we collaborate with others. So on behalf of the Franciscan Institute, I would like to say a very, very special thank you to Mr. Darren Dure for your very informative workshop this afternoon. And a very special thank you to all those who participated in this workshop as well. We ask you to stay tuned and to pay attention to the many other workshop opportunities that the Franciscan Institute will put forward in the near future as we try to raise the awareness against human trafficking. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and have a great evening. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.